Hi, Honey family, and welcome back. I hope you're all doing well. I have a good assortment of stories for you today that all take place in either nursing homes or hospitals, in the words of the nurses and CNAs who experienced them. So sit back and enjoy the show. If you like what you hear, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give me a thumbs up. I really do appreciate it. Story 1. Nursing Home Ghosts. All through college, and a little while after, I worked as a nurse's aide in a series of nursing homes. I spent most of that time in the Alzheimer's unit, hospice unit, or the general facility for those unable to care for themselves. My first aide job, I worked at a particular unsettled location. It was in an old hospital that had been converted to a care facility. It looked a lot like those old schools that was built in the 1950s. A lot of granite, brick, sturdy ceramic. It was beautiful. I think it has since been torn down and replaced with a brand new facility. One day, a lady resident was dying. She was getting near the end and was in and out of consciousness. Just past the foot of her bed is a sink and a counter. Along with all of her regular bathroom items, there was a small glass of water. When the resident would come to, she'd point to the end of the bed and mumble comments about how the little girl was going to knock over the glass of water. She would insist that we tell the little girl to stop playing around, that she was going to make a mess. Eventually, this resident slipped into unconsciousness. The nurse, an older woman herself, who had been in this role for decades and had clearly seen it all, was sitting with me and making small talk. We were just waiting for the inevitable, when suddenly the glass of water slides off the counter. The nurse doesn't even seem to notice. I, on the other hand, a 19-year-old, was mildly freaked out. I began to ask the nurse if she saw it too, but was cut off by her saying, "Let's just focus on our patient, shall we?" I pulled myself together and tried to think about my job. But honestly, I was kind of losing it. The cup was inches away from the edge of the counter, and there was nobody in the room with us. There was no reason for that cup to have slid off the counter. The resident eventually passed, and we did our thing. Fast forward a few hours. The way the hallways were set up, it took a very big T. At the top of the T was the nurse's station. That's where I was camped out most evenings. Everyone was in bed, and I was killing time between rounds. The nurse was on another floor doing something. I was all alone. If you looked at the ceiling, at the point where the two halls met, you see a circular mirror. It was so that you could see down all of the halls at once from the desk. Eventually, my peripheral picked up movement, and I looked at the mirror. Right there, in the middle of the hall, about 15 yards behind me, was the little girl. She looked to be about 6, with a little sundress and long brown hair. She was doing this slow, random dance that little girls do sometimes, without a care for the world. I lost it. I stood up and walked around the entrance of the nurse's station, while holding my hand up to the right, so that I couldn't see down the hallway. I bolted for the stairs. I found the nurse and told her what I saw. She laughed and admitted over the years that a lot of residents and staff had seen the little girl, and that she was nothing to worry about. It took me a couple hours to calm down. In the next couple of years, I continued to work there, but I never saw her again. Story 2. Every hospital is haunted. Every hospital I've worked at has had at least one ghost. Years ago, I worked at an old hospital that got shut down as they opened a brand new hospital. The old hospital was scheduled for demolition, and several of us decided that we wanted to do a final walkthrough of our old unit, just one last time for old time's sake. As we walked past what had once been the men's ward, we saw a couple figures in what would have been a completely empty ward. One of my coworkers peeked in to investigate and immediately backed out. His face was as white as an order sheet. Of course, I was curious then, so I looked in myself. All I saw was 2 older men sitting on a bed, chatting. My coworker explained that was 2 frequent flyers. They were royal pains in the patoot when they were alive, and they weren't alive anymore, and hadn't been for some time. She said that she'd heard a rumor they were still hanging around the ward, but that no one had actually seen them before. But there they were, on our final walkthrough, sitting on the bed. Story 3. The Nun's Roses. I used to work in an old Catholic hospital, where the labor and delivery unit is located now. It used to be the convent for nuns that worked at this hospital. One of the nuns had died of natural causes years ago, and she had loved roses. She raised quite a variety. Ever since the OB department was moved to this area, anytime a mother or baby was having difficulties, you could smell the scent of roses throughout the whole unit. The OB nurses know to be prepared when they start smelling the scent of roses. If a mother or baby dies, the room suddenly fills with rose petals, like rose petals will trickle down from the sky. It's one of the creepiest things I've ever seen, but also so loving when it happens. I was standing in the room one night when the baby died, and the room filled with white and pink rose petals. The nurses and the family were creeped out. I worked at another hospital where you would see a nurse in an old white dress and cap walk down the hallway. She would smile at you as she passed. Then she would walk into a patient's room and apply wrist restraints. All the nurses knew her. She died about 60 years ago and had worked in that hospital. You knew that when you saw her, you had to follow her and take the wrist restraints off whichever patient she had applied them to. That's the show for today. Thank you for listening. If you did like it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give me a thumbs up. Makes me do a happy dance, and, well, that's cool. Bye.